If you're planning on watching the new Mulan adaptation anytime soon and you're not keen on spoilers, click out of this video now.
Get out of here.
If you've stuck around and you're interested in hearing what we thought and our opinions on this movie, welcome.
Yeah.
I'm Stacey, this is Jeffrey, and we are Teacup Fury.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, let's just get straight into it. So the first thing that I have is just a lot of questions, people. So many questions. Where are the roads in China? Surely China had roads. Mulan, I don't think I saw her on a road once, yet she somehow traversed most of China without ever once being on a road, right?
Yep.
Like,
you can't have empires without roads.
You can't have empires
That's not
without
how it
roads.
works.
Like, every single time we saw her, she was in a field, a forest. Like, there was zero roads. It made no sense. Then there's also the fact that Mulan, as far as we can tell, has never been outside her village, yet somehow mostly knows the way to the army camp. I know the Phoenix does help her out towards the end, but she obviously had an idea of where she was going. She knew how to get from the Imperial City back to her house just fine. No directions.
She knew how to navigate Imperial Palace, period.
I know, right? She just walked in and was like, oh, I'm going over here. Like, she knew Palace protocol.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as she was in front of the Emperor, she was bowing appropriately.
Well, that's probably part of Chinese culture, where they knew that your relationship to the, your parents, your, elders, your emperor. So that's
I'm just saying that I was just impressed with her court etiquette, full stop. I felt that as someone coming from rural China or rural countryside, usually they're not as up to date with like court etiquette.
Yeah.
So but ultimately I was just confused as to how she always seemed to know where to go, aside from that one blip on the way to the camp, why there were no roads. Full stop. Anywhere near, the only place I saw a pathway or road was really the Imperial City. So for me, that was just confusing.
Yeah. And I mean, outside of roads, like the logistics and stuff, the plot just didn't seem to gel. Like, it seemed like they were trying to compromise between sticking true to the animation, because you had so many beats, like the training montage, the matchmaking, that were almost completely the same as the animation. But at the same time, the animation, you realize how much the songs do the heavy lifting with character development, because with the secondary characters in the live action, who are they? What are their names? Like,
what was the name of the love interest?
Yeah, exactly.
What was his name?
No idea.
Was it Li Shang?
We don't know anything about them besides that one conversation about, what do they like about, the women
how do you
they're
talk
trying to pursue.
Yeah.
Like, but
her fingers are like onion. Like, oh my god.
It completely robs them of their charm. In the animation, the songs get to do a lot of the heavy lifting, whereas the montages are robbed of any emotional, like, sort of
why does she or we care about anyone else in this movie?
Exactly.
Then it just means that when they have that scene where they're all sitting around and I'll look after you. It's like, why?
You don't know each other.
Also, sorry, speaking of like knowing each other, the most they said to her was like, you really stink.
Yeah.
I find it really hard to believe that a woman at the training camp wouldn't bathe or shower, yet she is okay with multiple times unwrapping her breast bindings in a room full of like 30 men. Now granted, I know they're supposed to be asleep, but like, so she's able to sleep with no blanket with her unwrapped chest, but yet somehow she never managed to sneak a bath at any point during the whole movie, like during that period of the movie.
Going back to the beats where, they're sitting around the fire being like, I got your back. And also the part where they believe Mulan. They're like, oh, if you wouldn't believe Huaju, why wouldn't you believe Mulan? But but at that point, in the animation, Mulan saves the day. Like, she is the hero. And it's without a doubt. They would have died without her. In this movie,
he means the battle scene in the mountains.
Yeah, in this movie, she goes off on her own.
Nobody sees her do anything.
Yeah. And then she comes back as like basically a new person, because for some reason when you like take off your hair clip or whatever and let your hair down, suddenly people can't recognize you. Like suddenly, oh no, like they believe that, you know, Hua Ju is like a man, but then with, you know, Mulan's hair down, it's like, oh my gosh, she's a woman now. Like it's like
Speaking of that scene, I didn't really understand the motivation. She's a woman.
Yeah.
We women would not go into battle with our hair down. If I had decided, you know what, I'm done hiding, I would just verbally say that. I wouldn't be like, let me take down my hair. Let me. I know my armor's been damaged, but you know, some armor is better than no armor. I wouldn't be like, oh, let me just take it all off. Why are the sleeves of her military grade undergarments so wide and long?
Is that standard issue?
Like, is that actually the same costume, like the same dressing that the men are wearing under their armor, or was that a stylistic choice just to make her look pretty on the battlefield? If it's the former and like the other, like traditionally Chinese military grade undergarments for the armor had those long sleeves, okay, fine. But if it's not and it's just a stylistic choice, why in the earth would a woman decide, you know what I need to do as I reveal my identity in the middle of battle, pull my hair down, undo all my armor, because I don't need any like protection.
Women don't need armor, Stacey.
And then let me like go around with these flappy like sleeves that are going to get in the way of everything. Let's be honest.
You know what? Empowered women don't need, you know, armor.
Except for on your hips.
They don't need...
Hip armor was important.
Yeah. Like, their hair needs to flow so that they get their chi flowing. It flows... The hair flows with the chi. That's the other thing. There's a huge misunderstanding of what chi is. Chi is basically like the breath. Or like, you know, the blood within you or something. Like the energy with you, it's flowing with you. Everyone has it. The chi is not the force. It seems like Disney's like, you know what? We got Star Wars here. Like, let's just make like Mulan like force sensitive. Like the chi is strong with her.
Also, why is it that like for Mulan she's chi sensitive, but the witch presumably is chi sensitive as well? In which case, why is the witch almost like Palpatine or something, where she's got these like extra powers that nobody else who's chi sensitive within the men seem to have? Like, for example, the commander, if he's so in tune with his chi, would he not be able to do some of that stuff too? Like, what are the rules with the chi exactly? Why is the chi gender specific?
Yeah. And why is it like Mulan? It's like they can sense it. Like like Donnie Yen's character is like, you know, basically like Yoda? I can sense. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. He's Chirrut. Chirrut is still alive. He just got sent back in time and across the galaxy to ancient China.
Yeah, it was so bizarre. I mean, and then she does like incredible feats as a child, and everyone's just like, and like, oh, how inconvenient.
Yeah.
Like, what?
The dialogue is so heavy-handed too. When she's a kid and like riding and sees the rabbit, like who says, like in real life, who's like, I saw two rabbits, one possibly a male, one a female. But when they run fast, you can't tell their gender. It's like that. It's so heavy-handed. It's basically trying to say.
Also,
like,
it was a bit pointless because initially when I saw the scene, I was like, "Are they little goats?" Because they were quite large rabbits. It didn't. My initial reaction was I thought they were goats.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Wait, maybe they're rabbits." And then she said, "Oh, rabbits." So I was like, "Oh, okay." But the whole thing meant that I spent most of that scene wondering what I was looking at.
I know.
Maybe if we'd been in a cinema, it would have seemed a bit different. It was obviously it's a movie for the big screen.
Whatever animal is cute.
Yeah, but yeah, it's like, and also the fact that her parents clearly don't give any care to her riding and seeing rabbits. So why? And she's supposed to be hiding this aspect of her. So why is she still, as an adult, running around like behaving like that? I don't know. So many questions, Mulan. Anyway, the point being, the motivations in terms of practicality of Mulan were just strange. The motivations and practicality of like the chi and force was strange. It didn't make sense. It really didn't. And yeah, I just spent most of my time as a woman. I didn't identify with anything she did. Also, that's another question. Why is it that Mulan just spent her whole time with dirt on her face? That was her disguise as a man. All the other men in the camp managed to keep their face clean.
Well, I think it's because she didn't shower, whereas everyone else did. That's...
I just refuse to believe that during the army where discipline's important and nobody like, I know her fellow army men said to her, "Oh, you stink," but like, you didn't even at least wash your face at any time.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
I think they wanted to signal to the audience that, she's trying to fit in and hide herself as a man because men are stinky and that kind of thing.
it also didn't make sense. Why was the guy into her when she smelled so bad?
Yeah.
Like, if the first thing you're noticing is like, boom, the smell, the last thing you're gonna, well, I don't know, I can't speak for men, but I presume it's going to be distracting from your attraction to the person, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe the pheromones or something, right? I don't know.
know.
Well, speaking of the relationship too, there was like zero sexual tension. Like, there was more sexual tension between the witch and Mulan than like...
That is so true. Yeah, like...
You just wanted, like, when they were talking and like she's like, "Join me," you just wanted Mulan to go off and be like, "Yeah, this society is just like patriarchal. Let's just tear this, shit down. We can rebuild together."
Honestly, yeah. Aside from being fond of her father, like, and her sister, presumably her mother, what motivation does Mulan truly have to side with the kingdom?
Like, in real ancient history, it's not like women's rights were solved. Like when Mulan, like, who technically is a fictional character, but like, yeah. So the feminist messaging is definitely a bit off there.
Oh, the feminist messaging. If this is a movie about a woman with a main female lead and hero, why is it the father's story? Like, the father's story about his daughter, right?
Yeah. It was puzzling because I think, so the director's a woman and like there's 2 or 3 women who are screenwriters on the screenplay. So why was the choice to have the narration be from a man's perspective? That really didn't really make sense
like,
to me.
he wasn't there for most of it, so how does he know all these details? Like, did his daughter really come home and was like, "You know what, they said I stank a lot"?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. Huh.
Yeah, it just seemed, if the whole point of the movie presumably is like to show the strong female character, why is it necessary to have a man validate her existence by telling her story? Almost?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The woman should tell her story.
I presume the idea was to communicate that he had, forgiven her for running off and was proud of her journey in the end. Like, she brought honor and prestige to the family, so like,
You saw that at the end, though.
Oh my gosh, the end. Oh, Jeffrey, you have to take this. I can't. I'm just too baffled to even talk about this.
How did they manage to catch up to Mulan and like arrive like 5 minutes after her?
2 minutes.
2 minutes
later.
after her with the sword they forged. Like, I don't know, in the 2 minutes, after she left, like, they were able to forge a sword and go rush after her. But despite just being 2 minutes behind, when they were like camping out overnight or something, they couldn't like see each other's campfires or be like, "Hey, wait up,
ride together."
Yeah.
Or when she was saying she's going to leave the city, they didn't just say, "Well, we'll ride with you, escort you." Like, maybe what actually happened was a lot of time had passed, but because Mulan never follows any roads and hasn't really had any life experience outside her village, maybe it just took her a ridiculously long amount of time to get home, in which case
there actually are roads.
the Imperial Guard had caught up with her more or less at that time.
They knew where all the highways were.
It was just so bizarre because like around her family home is pretty much all flat. There's no way that her or her family wouldn't have seen the guards coming behind her.
Yeah, literally 2 minutes behind.
Yeah, it was bizarre. And also, it's also the motivation of the witch as well, who again is a character who has felt powerless and still feels powerless, but who has grown in her strength, I guess. I didn't really understand her motivation. She wanted to bond with Mulan and have Mulan on her side, but I didn't really understand her devotion to the enemy, for example.
Yeah.
Once he started calling her dog, and it was clear that her position in his kingdom would be no different really than her position in the old kingdom had she not been exiled. It didn't really seem like what was in it for her at that point. And even like when she betrayed him at the end, it's like could she just not have given Mulan directions?
Yeah.
Like, why did she have to like pretend to Mulan that she was still on the enemy side, but fly ever so slowly across the city to then appear in front of him so that he could understand that she had betrayed him before he then killed her through her self-sacrifice to defend Mulan? I kind of felt like, would a better arc for her not have been that she like actually went with Mulan and that she redeemed herself in some regard, that she could then look to either rebuild her place in society, like as a redeemed character, as opposed to her redemption was just that she got in the way of an arrow and died.
Yeah, you can't have both. Like, you can't go both ways. Like, because they're trying to make the argument that, oh, society is too patriarchal and they won't accept women, right? And she literally makes the argument to Mulan. But then you can't go back on it and be like, oh, suddenly everything's changed, but they won't accept her. Like, if it's a redemption arc, it's a cheap one to just have her die. Like, dying, that's the thing. Dying is a shorthand in our culture, in entertainment, like in Hollywood, for redemption. Like, it's like anytime someone does, like, is coded as evil, but if they just die, for, like, you know, the good people, then it's like, oh,
I just felt
they're finally redeemed.
She was one of the more interesting characters. She didn't get a huge opportunity for character development, and I just felt that they kind of were cheap with her in the end. I would have found it personally more interesting had she survived and then had to rebuild a life with this new reality or her new perspective on life.
Or even having her save Mulan, but not have her die. Have her, like, she can't accept that this regime, right? The status quo. So she's not gonna go back to like beg for forgiveness with the emperor. And she goes off, and you know they're gonna make a sequel. I think they might like already have announced a sequel or something.
For the witch?
Mulan.
Oh, for the Mulan.
Yeah. So like, why not have the witch, you know, go off and become like a, you know, a recurring character or someone who comes back later, you know? Like, I think she was an interesting character that ultimately was used as a plot device, where it's like, you know, she was
also, let's be real, the witch had the capability of turning into bird, be like possessing people and stuff. Was it necessary? Like, she could have taken over the entire kingdom on her own.
I know,
like, why
right?
does she need the enemy with her? Like, honestly,
every magic system in like a fantasy like story, the magic system has to be explained. So if you want to use chi as a magic system, basically as a force type thing, you clearly have shown no one in this film comes close to her powers. So for her to die because of a arrow, when multiple characters have cut arrows who are technically weaker than her, like it just makes no sense.
She's shown so many different skills, and suddenly the only tool in her arsenal at that point is just self-sacrifice. She was able to throw a throwing star at Mulan specifically not to kill her.
Well, I think she meant to kill her.
I don't think she did.
No,
I think she meant to.
She was kind of surprised when she came back, like, "Oh, you're back."
No? I don't think she was. No.
Okay.
But anyway, for me, the witch, I was confused by her motives. I mean, I understood her motives, but at the same time, I was kind of confused as to...
I don't know. Well, no, but in a way, it almost seemed like she planned it from the beginning. Because even when she met Mulan, she was the one who told her, oh, Rory Khan wasn't a coward for running. He was going to attack the Imperial Palace. So she was the one driving this whole thing. So maybe she had planned to betray Rory Khan the whole time, right? So I don't know. Her character is just had so much potential, but at the end of the day, just existed to serve the plot. So.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. The plot was, they tried to keep it as close to the animation as possible, but in a way that sacrificed any creativity or like anything interesting. Like there were so many we've already gone through so many plot holes. Another plot hole: why did the emperor, upon news that they were invading the city, just head off in his horse that was very decorated? Like, God, they braided that horse's hair fast. With 5 guards, to an obvious trap.
The most obvious trap in history.
Really? And every other guard in the city just kind of stood in a courtyard in the meantime? Yeah. The emperor, who presumably has led this army, he's been to war before, he killed the predecessor. Yeah. Isn't intelligent enough to go with some soldiers? What?
Also, the biggest waste of Jet Li in a movie ever. You cast Jet Li as the emperor, and then his action scene is using the sheets or something to fight.
His biggest contribution was stop moping around, you're a warrior, essentially, to Mulan, which is the sword.
Get up, rise like the phoenix.
I'm wow.
The most frustrating thing is, who is this movie for? Because Mulan, the animated version, meant so much to young girls who are now women, like us, our generation. And also it had a huge impact on, the queer community, where Li Shang was a bisexual icon. Mulan has a trans subtext. So with the live action adaptation, removing things like reflection, which a lot of, women or gay people or trans people were able to relate to, that removes that subtext completely. And those are people who are who love that movie, right? And then when it comes to Li Shang, all that sort of sexual tension, the sort of bisexual subtext is gone. So it's a lot of the magic of the first film.
Also, as an Asian American.
Yeah, and then lastly, Asian Americans, which, at the end of the day, this new live action is still representation. And at the end of the day, representation, whether it's good or bad, is arguably a good thing, I think. When you don't have that much representation, you want every single movie you see or a TV show you see that to be a good one, because it represents you in a way, in your identity. And for, the one movie every year you get that has someone starring someone who looks like you to not be as good as you want it to be, definitely is disappointing.
Yeah. To tie back into what I said originally, which is that I have a gripe with how Disney go from their animation and depict it in live action. I personally don't like how it's just scene by scene, song by song. In this case, I actually would have preferred if they had gone scene by scene, song by song, because at least then I would have still had the nostalgia. I would have known exactly who every character was. I would have still, from having seen the cartoon, understood the context of their relationships and stuff. And the actions of the characters would just have made more sense. It's they try to stay close to the cartoon, but also be creative to the point where it was more unrealistic than a cartoon. Yeah. Which is crazy. It was also longer than the cartoon, yet less happened.
Yes. That's the biggest thing. It's the movie is something 15-20 minutes longer, but there's less character development, and there's just and also the scene where they're at the battlefield, where the rest of the army are being attacked by birds, right? And then the catapult kills one pile of people and the other pile of people, and somehow Mulan is able to get on her horse, ride stealthily, and bypass the
enemy,
the nomads, and then go climb the mountain to a point where they can turn the catapult to launch at the mountain to create an avalanche. Just made no sense.
Yeah, I mean, by the time she'd actually done that,
Yeah.
surely everyone else on the field would
Would
have
have
been
died.
dead. There was only like 6 to 8 clusters of people. 2 were
Yeah.
already gone in the space of 30 seconds. Like, she did not, like, yeah.
Have time.
Anyway, we can just keep going on. We're being very nitpicky.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some positives in this movie?
Asian representation, which is a positive.
Yeah, that's about it. Honestly, when it comes to her female representation, as a hero, she's a bit lackluster. And as a cast, she's in the minority. Given the plot, obviously the majority of the casting are men. So it's not like, there's...
Does it even meet the Bechdel test? Like, does she talk to another woman?
No, because when she talks to her mother, it's about
A man?
matchmaking.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Oh wait, she talked to her sister about spiders.
Okay.
Did that count? But
Alright.
they also talked...
It's such a low bar to
God.
pass.
I don't know. I don't think this movie, despite starring...
Oh, she talks to the witch.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
But there's 3 categories. What's the other 2 categories?
No, it's... Anyways, low bar.
Low bar, maybe a pass. We're not entirely sure. Other positives, there were parts of it that looked stunning.
Yeah.
Like where Mulan lived in the Hakka housing was pretty.
I liked it because my family's Hakka on my mother's side. So, like, I like the representation. I love the roundhouses. But Mulan is a northern tale. Hakka people with the roundhouses live in the south. And China's a big country. So, like, it's... again, that's what happens, I guess, when,
Wow.
no one Chinese wrote the script.
We're trying to come up with a positive here, and already it's back into the negative.
But no, that it is a positive, and that I did appreciate.
Yeah.
Like, I like seeing it because it does harken back to my culture, right? But
Yeah.
it's also inaccurate.
Yeah, it wasn't super accurate, but it was interesting to see. It's not a housing structure you see often in movies, or in fact, I don't think I've ever seen a Hakka house before, so that was interesting.
Yeah.
The Imperial Palace, when they were doing the shots, kind of not inside it, but kind of looking at it
Oh, it was
holistically with the
beautiful.
gardens and stuff, were
Yeah.
super stunning.
The throne room.
Another thing that I thought looked really aesthetically pleasing was when they were training and they were all doing their different formations of martial arts, because it's almost like a dance. Visually for me, I enjoy choreography, so visually for me that looked really cool. Also, the commander, it was a bit weird that he was just always randomly just there doing some sort of like martial arts. But I can't deny he looked really great doing it. Like his...
Also underused. Like Donnie Yen arguably is like the most famous martial artist of the last 20 years, He's like almost a successor to like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and like he is criminally underused by Disney constantly. Like in Rogue One, he had like, every time they cast Donnie Yen, you just have such high expectations. But I guess at the end of the day, he collects a good check from Disney, I presume. So, you can't argue with that.
Yeah, and when he does act, obviously, I've mostly seen him within the context of doing martial arts within movies.
Yeah.
You know how excellent he is.
He's iconic.
You can see, like, those few clips where you just see him in front of the soldiers kind of... I don't know if it's an instruction or showing off, because like as an instruction, clearly none of them were going to be able to follow it. And as a showing off, that doesn't really make sense either. Why would the commander just come out every day just to kind of show off?
It's for us. It's for us.
So I appreciated it from our end. It didn't really 100% make sure it sense in the movie either, but okay. And aside from that, what else did I enjoy? I mean, visually, it's a pretty movie. I really wish they'd lean more into the kind of extreme martial arts. What do you call that type of...
Wuxia.
Like the wuxia. Yeah. If you're going to do wuxia, go hard on it.
Exactly.
Don't do like wuxia light.
Yeah.
Like those guys from the outset set the expectation like, oh, they're
Running
running
up
up
the wall.
walls and stuff. And then it just became very like half-hearted towards the end.
You expected Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
Yeah.
but then at the end it was pretty traditional.
You just got the Crouching Tiger.
Yeah.
It's like, they didn't decide what style they were doing, and if it's wuxia, which I think is really exciting, and that's what you've established at the very start, just go for it. I mean, child Mulan was clearly building up to be this amazing wuxia, like martial artist.
She's
But
flying
then-
all over the place.
But then when she's training and stuff, suddenly she's kind of like, eh. And then she kind of taps into her chi. But like, you know, most of
she
that.
did a backflip on a horse.
Yeah. I mean, but then she did run up the side of some. But like, she never. Yeah, I know she didn't get the training needed to properly do that, but
It was half-hearted.
it's like, yeah. Also, yeah, and you know what? I'm just not going to. I'm just not going to, because I could just go on. Ultimately, I didn't have high expectations. I was hopeful. They didn't deliver even to my lowest hopefulness, so ultimately I'm just very disappointed. I would not watch this movie again, and I would not recommend this movie to anyone, because ultimately I'm not even sure who would enjoy it. I don't think it's really geared towards women. I don't think it's really geared to Asian Americans. I'm not even sure kids would enjoy it that much. Why wouldn't they just prefer the animation?
yeah.
Because it's cartoon and kids enjoy cartoon. So ultimately I'm just left with the question of,
Who is this for?
what was the point of this movie and who's it for?
Well, sadly, we know, because in interviews, it's been documented that Disney and the filmmakers have said they are making this movie for the Chinese audience.
Do you feel
No,
seen?
Chinese, like as
Oh,
in
like, do
China.
you think Chinese people are looking at this going, wow?
Well, that's the criticism, because from an Chinese American perspective, it is very nationalistic, as in like Mulan is very like, oh, country first, family first. And for more progressive people, it's a very brainwashy type message where it's not very feminist at all, because in terms of modern intersectional feminism, it's coupled with, you know, dismantling the patriarchy, which is, you know, tied to the state. So when your whole movie is basically the state is
It's a
the best thing ever.
contradiction.
Yeah.
But as a average Chinese person who maybe doesn't have a lot of education on feminism or isn't have that to the forefront of their mind, is this a movie that they'll watch and enjoy, or are they just gonna be like this is a bit of a mess of a movie?
That's what I'm wondering, because Mulan is one of the most adapted stories in China, in like Taiwan and Hong Kong, like all the Chinese speaking countries. Like, it's a major story, so like, why would they want a Western take on it too? But it is Disney, so they have lots of power when it comes to marketing, and I guess if they're working with the Chinese government, because I think when Disney is like, you know, negotiating with the Chinese government, they probably say, you know, oh, you know, we'll take this scene out or something. I hear they took out a kissing scene because they did some tests in like mainland China, and it didn't sit well with them, like,
Because
for them
they
to
would
kiss.
both in male form at the time?
No. At the end, when the characters, so you know, when they touched hands.
Oh, that was meant to be a
Apparently,
kiss.
it was supposed to be a kiss at first, but it didn't test well.
Oh.
So I think they do, because, you know, money talks, and China's a big market.
But ultimately, I just wonder, like, from a Chinese perspective, as you said, it's a story that's been told multiple times in China, because it is one of their, well, from Western perspective, it's one of their more prominent stories. But also, like, you know, in terms of the martial arts, the wuxia, there are so many, like, different Chinese movies that do that way better.
Yeah.
The representation of Chinese people within it may not make, I don't know, but it may not fully make sense within,
Yeah.
from a Chinese perspective, especially if they're picking up on, like, you know, a hacker home should be in the south, but the war is in the north, and like, you know, picking up on things where they're like, maybe
Is the
this
chi
doesn't-
the force?
Yeah, like, I just wonder, like, if it's not for Western women, and if it's not for Western Chinese Americans,
Yeah.
and if you're an actual Chinese person watching it, obviously we can't speak for
No.
Chinese people watching it, but I do wonder what boxes it ticks for them.
Is it
really.
too compromised? Like, the filmmakers had to be pulled in too many directions, or they had to please too many, like, audiences.
I'm just...
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a shame in some ways that this movie didn't get its general release in cinemas, because of the way it has been released, we won't really get the answers to some of those questions.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been really interesting had it been released to the cinemas, to have gotten like like all the reviews from and like the commentary and the buzz around the movie, as people from different markets watched it, and
Yeah.
critics versus the general population, etc. But because of the way it's been released, I don't know if we'll get, like, whilst obviously we're here critiquing it and other people will too, I don't think we'll get the same scope
The
and
numbers
variety.
won't talk because it's
Yeah.
hard to gauge how much, you know, money they make from it based, like, you know, there's no criteria. Like, if
Yeah.
Disney makes 500 million, is that good in a pandemic, right? So
Well,
I don't
yeah,
know.
I would have thought so.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, so thanks for tuning in. That's basically all our thoughts about Mulan. It was a lot. If you enjoyed this, please hit subscribe, and we will critique, analyze, you know, appreciate more movies in the future. And yeah,
Yeah, if you guys have any suggestions of movies that you'd be interested in hearing our thoughts on, let us know. We enjoy watching movies, and we have watched a lot of movies, so chances are good that if you have a suggestion, we may have already seen it, in which case we can let you know our thoughts on it. Sharing is caring. Anyway, guys, thank you for sticking with us. If you've made it to the end of the video, you are a all-star. We love you. Extra love sent your way, and see you soon.